Lawrence Bates here with your Real America's Voice news break. Thanks so much for being here with us. The eyes of the world are on the White House right now as several world leaders already there meeting with President Trump. We're told that a number of European leaders have already arrived at the White House. This is a live look. As you can see, the honor guard is in place to meet Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky is expected to arrive at any moment now in order to talk about negotiations for a potential peace deal with Russia. President Trump, of course, on Friday met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The commander-in-chief also claiming, quote, big progress on Russia for today. Proposals on the table reportedly include Russia relinquishing small pockets of Ukraine in exchange for Kiev giving up Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. Major cities like Donetsk and Luhansk are in that region, which is already under Russian control. Zelensky argues the region was taken unjustly. But Sunday, top Trump administration officials taking to the airways to explain the process and progress being made.
That the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
Our goal here is to have a peace agreement to end this war, okay? And obviously we felt, and I agreed, that there was enough progress, not a lot of progress, but enough progress made in those talks to allow us to move to the next phase. If not, we wouldn't be having Zelensky flying all the way over here. We wouldn't be having all the Europeans coming all the way over here. Now, understand and take with a grain of salt, I'm not saying we're on the verge of a peace deal, but I am saying that we saw movement, enough movement to justify a follow-up meeting with Zelensky and the Europeans, enough movement for us to dedicate even more time to this. You talk about the sanctions. Look, at the end of the day, if peace is not going to be possible here, and this is just going to continue on as a war, people will continue to die by the thousands. The president has that option to then come in and impose new sanctions.
And here's another live look at the White House as more and more world leaders are continuing to show up there. We'll, of course, have live coverage throughout the day here on Real America's Voice. Make sure to stay tuned for the very latest. For now, let's get you back to your regularly scheduled programming in The Charlie Kirk Show.
Great awakening is here. Welcome back to the Charlie Kirk Show.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. In just a second, we have the ambassador to NATO, great man Matthew Whitaker, joining us. We're here at the Bitcoin.com studio. I want to tell you guys about how we are able to go so viral. We have a video going hyper viral this weekend. Do we have a little taste of that? I don't think we do, but it is a video that is, I think, has well over 20 million views in the last couple days on just TikTok and Instagram. I want to tell you guys about the economic impact of TikTok. TikTokeconomicimpact.com. We've used it to go viral and reach billions and billions and billions of views. Like Dan O. Seasoning from Kentucky, who's TikTok to reach new customers, to grow from a one-man show to a team of 45. Or Arizona Taco King in Arizona, able to employ over 28 people, pay them well, thanks to the foot traffic TikTok brings in. Go to TikTokeconomicimpact.com to learn more. That is TikTokeconomicimpact.com. The success means jobs, support for families, and stronger local economies. Go to TikTokeconomicimpact.com. The stories behind the stats and portions of the Charlie Kirk Show are sponsored and brought to you in part by TikTokeconomicimpact.com. Joining us now is Ambassador Matthew Whitaker, U.S. Ambassador to NATO. Thank you so much, my friend, for making the time. You have a very difficult job, and so you are navigating it brilliantly and really honoring the president's directive in NATO. Ambassador Whitaker, give us an update of how the president is thinking about this, and will Ukraine be able to join NATO?
Yeah, well, first of all, Charlie, it's good to see you again. Great to be on your show. First, I think President Trump's been very clear that there currently is no path for Ukraine to join NATO. And it's not just a matter of snapping your fingers either on who joins NATO. There's 32 members. Everything we do is done by a unanimous decision. And so right now, there's not 32 people at the table that would vote for ascension. And that would assume that Ukraine could even qualify for membership. That would include some real rigorous anti-corruption efforts that I'm not certain that they would reach right now, and many other steps. But remember, the one thing that we need to understand about Ukraine is right now, they're the second largest European army that's actually the largest European army, because Turkey, who is in NATO, is the largest army. And so Ukraine does bring some advantages, and their defense industrial base is by far the most productive currently. And so Europe, I'm encouraging all my European allies and friends to buy from the Ukrainians once this peace is reached by President Trump, because they're going to need that hard currency to rebuild their economy. But they have a lot of things to improve before it would ever be on the table. But right now, President Trump has been very clear that they're not in line and not going to be a member of NATO. But ultimately, that's all up to the 32 allies.
So Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that there's talk about Vladimir Putin being open to security guarantees for Ukraine in return for not being in NATO. Would those guarantees include U.S. troops on the border of Russia and Ukraine?
I would be surprised. Ultimately, that's up to President Trump, who's mediating, as you know, this war and trying to bring it to a truce and hopefully an enduring peace, because as he says, the killing and the slaughter need to end. It's a complete meat grinder where tens of thousands of soldiers every single week are dying on the battlefield, together with the collateral damage to property and to civilians. And so it needs to end. President Trump is trying to do everything he can, obviously, to end this war. But at the same time, Secretary Rubio, when talk about security guarantees, I think that any boots on the ground, any security force is the coalition of the willing, which is currently being led by the Germans, the French, and the British. And so I don't think that there would be American boots on the ground, certainly not in any kind of significant kind of way. There might be some command and control. There might be some other things that only the U.S. can bring to that. It would be outside of NATO, Charlie. I think that's the other thing we got to make sure, because people are using this Article 5-like guarantee. And I think that's very dangerous when you talk about, Article 5-like guarantees, because that makes people think that NATO's involved. NATO won't be involved in any security guarantees. In fact, they will be specifically out of it because, again, there wouldn't be 32 allies that would agree to that framework.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The perspective of my audience and from me is we don't want America involved at all. We think this is long past exhausted and tired. And I think the president's perspective has been amazing, which is defy the national security establishment and the mainstream media and sit down and work this thing out. So what can we expect today? Let me tell you where our perspective is. And you're the ambassador to NATO, and so you have to be very diplomatic, and you got a tough job, and you're doing a great job. But let me tell you my thoughts, and you can navigate however you want. This looks as if this is a full court press by European leaders that want to continue this land and kinetic war in Ukraine and are very mad that President Trump might cut a deal with Vladimir Putin, because for the European Union, they view this as existential. You got Giorgia Meloni, you have the Germans, you have all the big players of Europe that are in the White House right now that are likely trying to, and Keir Starmer, that are trying to paint a completely different picture and potentially continue this war. You could almost say the European leaders are here to chaperone Zelensky through this entire thing in case there would be another blow up. And so tell us about the meeting, and then I'll have a follow-up question. What's going on today? And can you give our audience some hope that America won't be involved and this thing can be ended?
Well, first of all, Charlie, I want to, on the beginning premise, like you, because we were running into each other, since 2019, there's been nobody like you and I and so many others, Kash Patel, that were out there, supporting the president, including, in 2021 when there weren't a lot of people supporting President Trump. And so, I have met a lot of your listeners and viewers. I have spent a lot of time with them, gone to, your events, so many other events in the movement. And so I have, like you, a sense of what, the base and what President Trump supporters expect. I don't think, this is my perspective as the U.S. ambassador to NATO. I don't see that Europe wants to continue this war. And one of the great things that President Trump did and that I'm involved in is the selling of U.S. equipment to our European allies. So they're paying for it, and then they can supply it to Ukraine. That changed the entire dynamic, where under Joe Biden, we were just sending American equipment and munitions to Ukraine with no payments, no promises, and I think President Trump dramatically changed that situation, and so the bearing of European security is now on the shoulders of European taxpayers, and President Trump got that right, and I was proud to stand with him shoulder to shoulder and work on that, and that's part of what we agreed to at The Hague a couple months ago, and the 5% of European security. It's gonna make a huge difference. And on the war in Ukraine, you're right. I mean, this is ultimately it is a European's interest. It doesn't. Secretary Rubio, I think, said it really well yesterday. This is not America's war. This isn't Donald Trump's war. It would never happened if he had been in office in 2022. And so, a lot of this is at the feet of Joe Biden. Now, that doesn't mean that as a peacemaker, Donald Trump can't come in here, having, already settled about 6 other conflicts, come in here and try to mediate this and get to a position where the killing and the fighting ends. But, ultimately, those decisions are going to have to be made by the Ukrainians and the Russians, because they are the ones that are fighting this war, and they're going to have to come to some agreement. And I think President Trump's just trying to see if there's a set of circumstances where he can bring this to an end.
You are correct. It is not our war, but here's the fear, is it can quickly become our war because we're funding it, we'll send armaments, and before you know it, we're involved in another quagmire. I mean, Joe Biden spent over $200 billion in this, proxy conflict with Russia. And so Ukraine's position is a little unclear. Is it, some European leaders are saying you can't give any of the land back to Russia, even though Russia has won it. Can you comment on the land here? Because the land component of this is major. Russia took Crimea. They shouldn't have invaded. It was wrong that they did it. That was a immoral action by the hands of Vladimir Putin. But they did win significant gains in Ukraine. How is the land factoring in all this? Because security guarantees, Article 5, we got NATO off the table. Security guarantees is very, very murky, because you can get, basically the way we look at it is like, okay, you'll get the spirit of NATO without NATO, so not thrilled about that. But what about the land? I mean, there's a lot of clamoring about this. Please, Ambassador Whitaker.
Yeah, well, Charlie, first of all, there is a lot of clamoring, and to some extent right now, what's going to happen soon here at the White House is the conversation with the Europeans and with President Zelensky as to what Putin put on the table in Alaska, why President Trump determined that we could take a step forward in those negotiations and in trying to get to a peace deal. But I think a lot of it is yet to be determined. I think even, we talk about security guarantees. I think there's a lot of meat that needs to be put on those bones. I just don't think that there is a complete agreement among the coalition of the willing. President Trump has said that the U.S. would be involved. I don't think that means American troops in Ukraine. Now, obviously, they would love that, especially if there is an attack on one as an attack on all, kind of a treaty or an agreement. But right now, I think President Trump has earned the space to try to negotiate this.
I agree.
And he's mediating it, Charlie, as you know. And so mediators oftentimes see how far people can come, try to get their best and final, and try to bring both parties to a deal that's a deal. It's not a great deal for either side, but ultimately
I agree.
Gets the killing.
No, I think that's right.
So
look, he more than earned everybody's confidence after the Iran-Israel masterclass. I mean, that's, and so we just got to let the master do his thing. The fear that we have is all these other European actors that are going to be lying to President Trump along the way. I know that you got to deal with them, but they got a whole separate agenda. And President Trump had a Truth Social about this earlier. He said, I'm convinced if Russia completely surrendered and gave up all the land, that the fake news media and their Democrat partners would say this would be a humiliating day for President Donald Trump. And so just in closing here, Ambassador Whitaker, can you just give the audience some faith and confidence that America First will be resolutely defended, that we are going to have a commitment to this realignment of foreign policy while also in the pursuit of peace? Because our audience is a little bit uneasy, not at President Trump, not at you, but at the European actors that are trying to keep this thing unnecessarily going. Final thoughts, Ambassador Whitaker.
My final thoughts, Charlie, are, quite frankly, I think, President Trump represents the America First movement. I'm with him and have been there from the beginning, as you know. And so, we are fighting hard every single day for America First and for a resolution of this war. And I would not listen to a lot of the noise that you hear from the mainstream media and a lot of, kind of the chatter that's coming out of Europe, because again, that's not the deal that President Trump's going to cut. He's just going to see if he can get a deal done that is in the interest of the American people. Because again, this is not his war. It's not America's war. We're not fighting this war. And so ultimately, I think President Trump, like I mentioned, and I know you agree, has earned our trust to try to land this plane if it can be landed.
He has. And in your discussions, just reiterate it, no U.S. troops. That is a very serious salvo here. That is the last thing that we need. Thank you so much, Ambassador Whitaker. Keep up the great work.
Right.
You have quite a challenge ahead of you. Thank you. What do we have, guys? Alan Jackson Ministries. Check it out right now, Alan Jackson Ministries. I'm excited to tell you I'll be speaking at the Culture and Christianity Conference at World Outreach Church just south of Nashville, Tennessee this September. I'm inviting you to join me. My friend Pastor Alan Jackson organized this conference so we can address the issues we're facing in today's culture, but through the lens of God's truth. When you attend, you'll gain insight and valuable perspective on what's happening in the world today. Learn how to recognize truth from deception. Join me, Pastor Alan Sage Steele, Dr. Bill Lyle, and my wife, Erica Kirk, and many more September 19th and 20th. Registration is now open. Go to alanjackson.com/Charlie. That is alanjackson.com/Charlie. Check it out right now, alanjackson.com/Charlie. Email us as always, freedom@charliekirk.com. We'll be right back.